Hey everybody, welcome to Breakfast All Day. Matt, Christy, Alonso. For years, people kept telling me that I had to see this amazing movie called The Guilty. And now there's another one because Americans don't like subtitles. Tell us about it, Matt.
Yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal stars in a movie directed by Antoine Fuqua. This reunites them after they had done Southpaw together. And Gyllenhaal plays an LAPD officer, Joe Baylor, and he is working a 911 call center. You definitely get the sense very early on that he would rather be out on the streets, but something has happened and he is stuck behind the desk answering the phone. He doesn't like it. He clearly doesn't like it. He doesn't really seem to take it all that seriously. Because when he gets calls from somebody being, somebody hit my car or whatever, he just gives them shit. He's not great at the job. And the more the movie goes on, you start to hear like, well, he's maybe got to go to a court date the next day and that's going to do something. And little pieces of what's going on with him get kind of doled out as the movie goes on. Meanwhile, he gets this frantic call from a woman who has been abducted. And this starts to sound an awful lot like the Halle Berry movie, The Call, AKA That Wig. But then we start to see even more. This call brings out a lot in Joe, and it's an interesting character piece. This movie is a pandemic production, but you'd never really know it because it is mostly, it hides itself as a movie mostly about Jake Gyllenhaal's character, just kind of answering phones, and he never really hits the streets. He just keeps on these different calls, and as the calls go, you learn more and more about his character. He loses his temper with the CHP dispatcher. He calls his old sergeant. He gets on the phone, who's voiced by Ethan Hawke. The girl that's been abducted is voiced by Riley Keough. One of the calls that he's really shitty to is Paul Dano on the other line. I found this movie to be really interesting. It's a great performance and a fairly showy one from Gyllenhaal, but I think he does pretty well showing us a guy who is arguably sort of at the end of his rope, without really realizing it. And you kind of, there's a corner he turns. I don't want to give anything away. This is written by Nick Pozzolano, who wrote the first season of True Detective. It's not that grim, but it's definitely like cops have shitty lives, or unhappy cops. So I kind of like this movie. I thought it moved along nicely. It's on Netflix, and I think it's worth watching.
So Alonso, you've seen the Swedish original.
Danish.
Is it Danish? Okay, he's Swedish. He's Swedish.
Okay.
I think it's Swedish,
it's
a Scandinavian country.
Exactly. So maybe I'm trusting somebody who wrote in on IMDb and called it Danish, and they were wrong. Anyway, it is Danish.
Okay, Danish. I believe you.
I saw it a couple of weeks ago because, again, like people have been telling me for years, oh, it's so good, you got to see it. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to see the remake. I should finally see it. So I think this movie exists in two shadows. One is the 2018 Danish remake, which was acclaimed everywhere and got a US release. And the other is Locke, which is one of my favorite movies of the last 10 years.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. It reminded me of Locke too.
Tom Hardy, and the whole movie is Tom Hardy driving the car and having these phone conversations and all these things, and his life unraveling around him, and him trying to, like, on the one hand, make sure that this construction project is going to go through, and on the other hand is like destroying his marriage and trying to like reunite with this woman that he has gotten pregnant from a one-night stand. And that movie is so brilliantly suspenseful and tautly crafted and riveting. And LA Film Critics gave Tom Hardy Best Actor that year because it's an amazing performance. And this movie to me felt in so many ways like what happens when you do the American version of a European film. Like the Danish version is very cool and sleek, and like it's this guy dealing with this stuff, and he is imploding, and you start to understand why his life is where it is right now and what's going on with these phone calls and trying to help this woman out. And in this one, it's like there's massive fires across Southern California, like, you know, all this is like noise and color and light that they have to like jam in, because God forbid you try and get American audiences to sit still for a cool character piece. And I think, and then Gyllenhaal is, like you said, it's big. It is a big performance, and it's a little overwhelming for me at times. And this movie feels too like, those Europeans, and you know, they don't know how to make a movie. We're going to put some testosterone in this thing and get American audiences lined up around the block. And so it kept putting me out of it by how overplayed so much of it was. And I think both movies pale next to Locke, which I think is the sort of blueprint for the kind of story they're trying to tell.
I totally thought of Locke and of you while I was watching it, because I know that you share my deep love for Locke. But I was impressed by the quality of the voice cast they have.
Well, sure.
Riley Keough is really great in this. And Riley Keough has to like take you on a whole journey just with her voice.
And Peter Sarsgard.
Yeah, a lot of the voices that call in, like Bill Burr and like Paul Dano, like they're kind of like funny, jokey examples of like the wild stuff 911, you know, dispatchers have to deal with. But you say that Jake Gyllenhaal is big, and he is, but he isn't always big. And it's the build to that I found impressive, that he gets to show a whole lot of range in the space of one overnight shift. Because in the beginning, he's, you know, kind of quietly judgy, kind of twitchy. He's doing a couple of things at once. He feels like he doesn't belong there. He still feels like he has that sense of moral authority as a police officer, and is trying to like inflict it upon callers who just need help. And he's trying to like talk to them about the choices they made with their lives when all they need is an ambulance. So I thought that was an interesting thing to play. But they do have to do a whole lot over this, you know, the space of a little time in like one location. And yeah, you're right. The thing with the fires is big and noisy, but there quite frequently are wildfires in Southern California.
And they make him asthmatic too, which I'm not entirely sure why, because he's not in the original one.
To add a sense of panic, I guess. Is there also a thing with the ex-wife on the phone in the original? Is he also dealing with like his wife and his daughter and the separation?
I'm trying to remember, because having just seen the new one,
yeah,
I don't know if that comes up so much,
because that compounds the stress. There's all kinds of like other peripheral things that are compounding the stress.
Yeah.
But I found it really interesting as a larger look at the kinds of narratives that we tell ourselves, and like how we can be so consumed by the way we think a story is going to go, and like the lies we tell ourselves to make it so, right? Like he has his idea in his mind of what is happening in this urgent series of phone calls, and maybe he's not right, and maybe he's projecting based on his own personal experience. And so from as a larger story of how we lie to ourselves to comfort ourselves,
and we see
that
what
was
we
interesting.
See.
Yeah,
well, they're both mansplaining the movie, you know.
What is that?
Like the mansplaining Cole in the movie.
Oh,
like
I see.
Because he determines how it should be done, and like everybody else is in his way and they're doing it wrong. And it's like, maybe you need to like step back and think about why procedures exist, you know, and that sort of thing.
And he's struggling to maintain control over something that he has, you know, spiraled out of his grasp, which is the real situation that's happening in his life. And so I think he feels like there's a shot at redemption here, but he's just totally lying to himself to comfort himself.
Yeah. I didn't mind the thing about the fires, because it gave an excuse to have an understaffed CHP to respond to certain things. Like
true, and to make visibility
like,
difficult. They do work it in pretty well, but it just opens with all of these like big things. I'm like, this is a movie that's in one room. Why are there helicopter shots in this movie? You know,
two things I want to mention real fast before we go. The guy who walks in on him when he's by himself later in the film, and he says, "Hey, I've got a phone call for you," whatever, was the bartender at the rink where Nick played hockey for years. His name is Brett Porter. I'm like, hey, it's Brett. And also they get the geography right.
Yes.
You know, I love that. You know, I love me in LA
I
Freeway
thought of you
movie.
actually during that part.
I'm like, ooh, they're going eastbound on the 10. And when you get 10 to the 210, yes, that is the San Bernardino Airport. They're in the right place. So anyway, that always makes me happy.
Well, if you want to see the original, The Guilty, it is streaming on Hulu. If you want to see the original Locke, it is on Canopy and Hoopla.
Okay.
What are our numbers?
I am saying 7.4.
I said 6.
Okay. Matt?
I give it a 7.
Okay, 6.8 is our number. The Guilty is on Netflix. It's also in theaters, but it's on Netflix.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for watching. Like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, check us out on the social medias at BeFastAllDay, and subscribe to our Patreon page at BeFastAllDay. Sorry, at patreon.com/BeFastAllDay. Yesterday or earlier this week was International Podcast Day. And to support us or any other podcast you listen to on the regular is a good thing to do. And if you're a subscriber, you get exclusive access to things like our TV recaps. We're currently talking about Ted Lasso and The Morning Show. And later this month, we'll be reviewing a horror classic that our subscribers will choose. So become one of those. And on top of everything else, the cherry on the icing, on the fondant, on the ganache, on the cake, you get to see all of these videos with no ad interruption over at patreon.com/BeFastAllDay. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Bye.